Okay, guys, today we're going to talk about framing a quote. You are going to be including research in this essay, and it might be library research and it might be your own empirical research. But either way, you can never let a quote stand alone. The essay should be your work, and you can integrate other people's ideas, but you need to explain them in your own way. What I see a lot of writers doing at the beginning is just throwing a whole sentence in the middle of their essay that was completely written by somebody else. So we want to try to avoid that and integrate the quotes into our own sentences. So I have this little document about framing a quote, and I said that a quote should never stand alone in a college essay. The point of every essay that you write is for you to think critically about the information and use those quotes to support your ideas. Simply copying entire sentences someone else wrote and expecting them to make your argument is a waste of time. If I wanted to read what they wrote, I would just read their original article. You are using it to support your ideas. So because of that, it's important to integrate all of your quotes into your own sentences. We do this by creating a frame for the quote. So there's actually 4 parts to the frame. You're already doing one of them because the last part is the analysis, where you explain the importance of the quote. We've already talked about that, so you already know about analysis. But we're going to talk about the first 3 right now. You should include all 3 of these parts every time you quote or even paraphrase, which means just explaining it in your own words, every time you use somebody else's ideas. So the first part is a signal phrase that lets the reader know I'm about to introduce somebody else's words. The middle of it is the quoted material, and then at the end you have a citation. So the signal phrase and the citation sort of make a frame, like a picture frame, around the quoted material. They mark the beginning of it and the end of it. So I have an example here, and I said, start with a signal phrase that signals to the reader you're about to provide someone else's research. You need to introduce both the name of the author and a verb. So if I was reading an article written by Professor King, that would be the author, and then I would have a verb here. I'm going to attach a copy of the textbook chapter that has a whole list of verbs that you could use for your signal phrases. But this signals, this is like a signpost that says, I'm about to have a quote. Professor King argued. I like to move then to the other end, to the citation. If you're using the author's name in the sentence, you only need the year of publication in the parentheses. So if you have a print source, you would have the page number. Not very many people are using print sources though. If you got your material online, you just need the year. So I am creating my frame by having my signal phrase at the beginning and my citation at the end. And those are kind of blocking both ends of the quoted material. So the next thing is that I need to finally add the quoted material from my research. So I try to filter the quoted material down to only the most essential parts. And I try to just find keywords and keep it brief, because every time I'm using somebody else's voice, it interrupts the flow of my writing. So I try to keep it as small and short as possible, because it's almost emphasized in my writing. And I certainly couldn't, it's like, it's something that is drawn attention to, and I certainly don't want to draw attention to lines and lines and lines of text. So I find my keywords, and then I build a clear sentence around those words. So I never let the quote just float around in my sentence. So my sentence would look like this. Professor King argued, summer semester students are always far superior to students who take comp in the fall. And then I would have my citation of 2020. Notice that the period goes outside of the citation because the citation is still part of the sentence. It goes with this quoted material. So it still needs to be inside that sentence, and the period goes after that. Okay, so you can see my keywords here, far superior. There may have been a full sentence in my researched material, but this is the only part that I thought was worth quoting. And you can see that it almost sounds emphasized in the sentence. Professor King argued summer students are always far superior to students who take comp in the fall, 2020. Okay, I want to go on to an example, and I'm going to go through the example, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to give you time to think about it, and then I'll probably do another video where I go through it. So this is a recent editorial, and it's about the COVID virus and how people are talking on the telephone a lot more since the pandemic began. Typically, we direct message or text each other, but this author is arguing that it's more important now to actually speak to people instead of just texting or messaging. So I provided the information you're going to need. The author is Tim Kreider, and it was published on March 22nd, 2020. I gave you the author and the date because if you remember up here, we need to have the author as the beginning of our signal phrase and then the citation at the end of our quoted material. So you're going to need those two pieces of information. Okay, so I said the author is Tim Kreider and the article is published on March 22nd. This is just one paragraph that I took from his article, and he said, inspired by our conversation, I started surprising other people in these first few days of quarantine by just calling them up to chat. They too seemed pleasantly surprised. We'd talk for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour or more about what a weird, unprecedented time it is, and how disastrous it is to have no one competent in charge of the crisis, and how much food we have, and what local stores are like now, and how seriously we're taking the restrictions on our movements, and how it affects our relationships. Do you hastily break up rather than be trapped for months with the wrong person? Is a pandemic a good excuse to reconcile with an ex? So this is a list of all of the kinds of conversations he was having on the phone with people. We made jokes about it and we laughed together from opposite coasts, like kids cracking up at a funeral. So you might remember what this was like when the pandemic first started, and you probably had conversations about how weird it was, how hard it is not to have good people in charge leading us, when everyone was running out of toilet paper, what the local stores are like, how seriously you're paying attention to the restrictions on your movements. Maybe you had these same conversations. But this was just a random article that I had read, and I went through and I highlighted things that I might want to quote. I definitely recommend that you go through your research and use a highlighting tool to just highlight the keywords or the phrases that you might want to quote. So I thought it was interesting that he said that when he called, people were pleasantly surprised. I liked how he described it as a weird, unprecedented time. When he was talking about breaking up, I thought it was interesting that he used the word trapped. So those were some things I might want to use in my essay, for example. So I've highlighted those, and now I'm going to try to create a frame. So I've got 3 frames because I've got 3 highlighted sections. And I'm gonna pause here and come back in just a second, but I would like for you to try to fill in these frames. So you have access to this document, but I would like for you to try to fill it in. Remember that the signal phrase is going in this box, the citation is going in this box, and your quoted material is going here, but you need to build a sentence around it, okay? So why don't you try to do some quotes, and then we'll come back in just a second and I'll share what I came up with. All right, see you guys in a minute.